Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Whatever time of day it is, I pray that as you are hearing this message, your mind, your body, your heart, your spirit are all poised to receive and respond to words of wisdom. Ashe. I'll never forget the first few times that I was told that I needed to be initiated. Obviously, this is early in my practice, and I was totally unfamiliar with the language and the terminology and the meaning of different messages I received from Babalawo. And in that day, it was a little more coded. People didn't come right out and say, you need to be initiated to Ifa or you need to be initiated to Orisha. They would say, this Orisha is very close to you. This Orisha is very supportive of you. This Orisha is calling out to you. You have a debt to pay with this Orisha. This Orisha is quarreling with you. Things like that, right? And it required a little bit more familiarity, right? It was a nuanced conversation that the priests were having with practitioners at that time. So needless to say, I missed the message a variety of times. And it wasn't until I started to have, it wasn't until I started to realize the significance of my experiences, why certain things kept happening in my life, that I put two and two together and I realized, oh, this is happening because I need to be initiated. Da, 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 da. And so I started to put everything together, and I went to Nigeria, Oshogbo more specifically, and I was initiated to Ifa. In the meantime, however, I served, I should say, as an apprentice under a Babalawo, and for about 5 years, I apprenticed directly under him. And it gave me an opportunity to learn a bit more about the craft and meet other priests and fellowship with other practitioners and compare, and over that time, a handful of guys went over to Nigeria as well and were initiated and came back. And so all of these things together allowed me to observe and create some kind of an understanding and orientation for myself, and set some kind of expectations for what this initiation process was all about. And so based on that and my years of experience since that time, I want to share some bright ideas and best practices about initiation readiness. Okay. Now, if you don't know, this is the Orisha Lifestyle Academy, and I am your instructor, Obafemi Origunwa. And today's lesson is all about initiation. Right? Are you ready for initiation? And when I'm talking about initiation, I mean Orisha initiation, including Ifa. Oromila is an Orisha, just like Oshun or Obatala or Okun. So I'm talking about initiation in the Yoruba context as it plays out in West Africa, and looking at some of the specific things you need to know and have and be able to do in order to be ready for initiation. Now, Ifa gives us some best practices, right, in terms of our mindset primarily, and when it comes to initiation. And one of the things that is built into the Ifa mindset, right, or the devotee's mindset according to Ifa, is this idea of a twofold sacrifice. Many times when we cast Ifa, the message will carry with it an advice for a twofold sacrifice. You need to sacrifice to have children and to maintain the children. You need to sacrifice to get a spouse and then keep the spouse. You need to sacrifice to build a business and then maintain the business. So we'll see a variety of different messages to that effect. They'll tell the story about a person or a tree or an animal who made sacrifice to be prolific, but refused to make the subsequent sacrifice to protect all of the bounty that it produces, right? So you see fruits and vegetables that produce to be abundant. The corn sacrificed to be abundant, but didn't sacrifice to protect its children, right? And so as soon as the corn ripens and it makes all these thousands and thousands of seeds, then people harvest it and they eat it. The okra, same thing. I mean, it goes on and on and on, right? But the idea is that you need to understand not only productivity, but maintenance. Okay? You sacrifice on one level to procure or to acquire or to develop, but then there's a subsequent sacrifice to maintain everything that you create. And so that's going to be crucial in your understanding of being initiated, right? You sacrifice what is necessary to get initiated, but then you need to make another sacrifice to maintain the altar, maintain the icons, maintain your relationship with the deity after the fact, right? Other verses of Ifa iterate how important it is to not do things or not set yourself up for situations that you can't accomplish. Don't jump into the water if you can't swim. Don't climb a ladder if you can't climb down, right? Proverbs that tell us, the butterfly is deceiving itself. It has wings like a bird, but it can never perform like a bird performs. Okay, so it's like there's a realism, a practical realism that goes into Yoruba indigenous thought patterns, right? Be realistic about what the performance criteria is before you get involved, because you're going to create problems for yourself otherwise. Lots of verses of Ifa tell us how important it is to confer with wise people before we even consult Ifa. Ifa really drives home how important it is for you to have reliable, trustworthy, wise associates, parents included, teachers included, and to talk to those people and bear your soul to them. Be honest and transparent with the people around you, wise people around you, so that you can take advantage of that and you can get the benefit of what they know and do the right thing before you get into deep waters. And so it is with initiation, right? You should be talking to people. You should be getting information from knowledgeable people. You should talk to initiates. You should talk to actual devotees and practitioners. You should follow them around and spend time with them and see what they do on a day-to-day basis and get a real clear understanding of what goes into this. What am I preparing myself for? What does it look like, and how can I accommodate this kind of lifestyle in my day-to-day movement? Okay. Ifa gives us or answers questions around self-deception, right? Ifa is a pragmatic tradition, and it advises us not to deceive ourselves, not to delude ourselves, not to be doing make-believe, pretend things in the name of spirituality, right? And on and on and on. Ifa gives us numerous examples of the proper way to think about spiritual pursuits. Okay? And so that's the first thing that I want to, put out there to set the stage for this particular conversation. Right? Ifa really does invite you to be practical and to think and to expose yourself as much as possible to the everyday tangible practice so that you understand as much as you can before you dive into the water. Okay. Now, some of those elements, right? Some of those elements are beyond your ability to predict, right? Some of you don't have access to people who you can talk to and get reliable information. So I'm going to, throw some considerations out there that I know to be important in order for you to make your mind up about really how ready are you, right? In order for you to assess how ready you are, I'm going to throw some things out there for you to think about and start to assess your initiation readiness in real terms. All right. So some of the things to consider are physical, basic stuff, physical location. Where is your Orisha going to live? Right. Orisha is a living thing. It's not a book. It's not a table. It's not a shelf. It's a living entity. It's like you're going to get a bird or a fish or a dog or a cat. Do you have living accommodations that can support and maintain an Orisha, the Orisha that you want to bring home, right? Because Egbe doesn't live in the same place as Obatala. Oshun doesn't have the same living conditions as Okun. Obaluaye does not live in the same places that Oromila lives in. So you need to understand physically what kind of an environment does this Orisha need, and do I have that environment? Okay, that's very important. That's very, very important, right? You want to have a python. You guys hear all these stories about people, keeping tigers in their house, right? Doesn't that look crazy when you look up and you see these shows and people have, leopards in their house and lions and cheetahs and things? So what kind of crazy person is this, right? But you want to bring Obaluaye into your house. It's not that different. You got to really take into consideration what kind of deity you're talking about and where does it really need to live. What's the habitat, the ideal habitat for each divinity? All right. Financial. This is something that people don't like to think about, but it's crucial. How much does it cost to maintain an Orisha? How much money do you need to spend on a weekly, monthly basis to appease this Orisha? That's something you definitely want to figure out. Okay. Well, how much palm oil, gin, cola nuts, etc. that really goes into maintaining this deity. Okay. Similarly, how much time goes into devotion? How many hours per week does a person spend or invest in Orisha devotion? What needs to happen? There's not only daily obligations, there are weekly obligations, there are monthly obligations, there are annual obligations. Are you ready to do that? Do you have the time? Do you have the capacity to really maintain this Orisha the way it deserves and the way it's going to demand? Intellectually, what do you need to know in order to venerate Orisha? What do you need to be able to do? What kinds of daily rituals, weekly rituals, monthly rituals, annual rituals? What do you need to be able to do in order to maintain this divinity and stay in good, good standing with that deity? These are all the things that you need to research, right? And then, what are the consequences for failure? If you fail to take good care of Ogun, is it the same as failure to take proper care of Oshun? Is Eshu going to respond to your mistakes the same way that Olokun will? Okay, if you don't get this right, what are the consequences? Those are things that you also really need to consider. If I don't do this right, If you have a car and you don't take proper care of your car, what can happen? If you don't put oil in the car versus if you don't put air in the tires. If you don't change the filters versus if you don't change the knobs on the air conditioner, right? There are different consequences for missing the boat, and you need to know that. You gotta be able to calculate to some degree the consequences and the natural responses to certain kinds of mistakes with the Orisha, right? And all this is necessary if you believe that Orisha is a real thing, okay, then you understand it's a real code. It's actual. It isn't all relative, and the Orisha are just gonna, esoterically satisfy all of your needs and protect all of your interests, even though you're doing everything wrong, right? That's just, there's no universe, there is no plane of existence wherein you can just do whatever you want and be however you want to be and still expect to get the desired outcomes. Let's be realistic, right? So you got to understand the consequences. Hey, if I don't get this right, what can happen? Right? And where do I have flexibility and where do I not have flexibility? So as you give some thought to those ideas and those practices, then you're going to be able to make more realistic decisions about assessing your initiation readiness. Okay? Now, I can tell you that just generally speaking, most people aren't going to have too dramatic an experience one way or the other. It's not like once you get initiated, all of a sudden, when you drive down the street, there's always just green lights, green lights, green lights. Suddenly all your credit cards have magically been paid off. You got initiated and now your spouse is just jovial and agreeable under any circumstances, and you never can aggravate them, right? That's probably not going to happen. And likewise, you're probably not going to find a situation where you were 30 seconds late in making this precise offering and your house just mysteriously, slipped into a sinkhole, right? And your job, fired you, and your health insurance expired the same day, right? That's probably not going to happen. You're not going to fall into this horrible sequence of horrible events because you didn't do this offering exactly right on this exact day. That's probably not going to happen. What's probably going to happen? Something much worse. You're going to gradually, slowly slip into mediocrity. Your greatest opportunity to fulfill your destiny and realize your spiritual potential is going to become yet another mediocre endeavor. That's what's more likely to happen. You're gonna slowly but surely lapse into a situation where you're doing it kind of sort of the way you think it should be done, but you don't really know because you didn't take the time to do the due diligence, and it just is a question of appearances. You got something that looks like what everybody thinks is supposed to be happening, but you really don't have an idea, right? That's more than likely to happen. And if that's what you want to do with your spiritual discipline, great, rock out. But I believe that people who pursue Orisha, deep in your heart, and maybe not so deep in your heart, it's not so far from the forefront of your consciousness that you want to do this right. You are pursuing your ancestral practices because you've already done the mediocre thing. You've been involved in religious and spiritual activities wherein nobody had any real roots. Nobody could really validate or verify what they were practicing. Nobody truly understood the practices and the vocabulary and the belief system and the history. No, you know what I mean? And people just accepted it and went along with the mediocrity because it was what everybody else did. It was socially acceptable to just look the part. You've already been there. You've already done that. You know what that adds up to. And you know it isn't sufficient. And that in your heart, that's what's driving you to pursue Orisha, because you know that there's something real in this tradition. You know that there are some real, tangible, experiential differences between Orisha and what you've done before. So because of that, I'm going to say you really want to find out if you're ready, and you want to do everything that you possibly can to make sure that you're ready, so that when the time comes, you can move forward with confidence, with clarity, with certainty. That is the way to pursue your destiny. Now, in the School of Orisha Studies, I offer 6 levels of instruction in 3 primary focus areas. 6 levels of instruction in 3 fundamental focus areas. It's ideal for anybody who is interested in really getting ready. It's self-paced. You can start where you are, and I'll walk you through step by step everything that you need to know and you need to be able to do in order to be properly initiated and then progress at your own pace and according to your natural gifts and talents, so that you can fulfill your destiny. If that is something that you're interested in, I invite you to visit me at obafemio.com or orishalifestyle.com and find out how the School of Orisha Studies and my teachings offered therein can help take your life and your practice to the next level. I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye for now.